Thomson Reuters, and we're here to talk about pigeons.
Sort of.
Sort of. It's Tom's idea for a catchy title. There you go. So this is us. We have both been working at Thomson Reuters for a couple of years now. Tom's been in the cloud team for maybe a year and a half, almost there now. I've been at Thomson Reuters for about 4 years. I've been working in cloud all that time. And yeah, we're here just to talk about enterprise, which is a topic that we've sort of picked up on in some of these meetings where people talk about technology or they talk about a product and they don't really engage with enterprise very well from what we can tell. So we thought we'll brave it, not put everything on Alexis and come here and talk to you in real life.
We should have
just
brought pigeons.
It's
still
on
order though, isn't it?
Yeah, we should have brought pigeons.
Oh, it would have been good, wouldn't it?
So that's us. We've got Twitter handles. So just to set the scene with Thomson Reuters, just to make sure you guys are aware of who we are, what we do. We are the answer company. That's how we sell ourselves. Our aim is to provide trusted information and answers to people, to customers, so that they can make the right choices in their company. Ultimately, we are powered by the world's most trusted news organization, and Tom will touch on that a little bit later. Just to give you an idea of our footprint, we're based in over 100 countries. We've got the list up there, just by top 10 locations ranked by employees. We've got Egan, and if no one knows where Egan is, which I'm assuming quite a lot of people don't, that is in Minnesota. So my boss is going to love the fact that no one knows where Egan is. But it's in Minnesota in the States, just south of the Twin Cities. You can see that London's fourth there. I just want to give you a brief understanding of the business units that we've got. Is it yours?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just Tom.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll talk about it.
Tom can talk about that then.
So these are the four core kind of businesses that Thomson Reuters operate. Probably the biggest by revenue and is the financial and risk business, and these are the financial trading platforms that you might see in banks, investment hedge funds, professional traders, FX traders. And around 5,000 asset managers, banks, corporate treasurers, and hedge funds use Thomson Reuters transactions platforms to trade around $350 billion of FX a day. And the most recent statistic I could pull from Financial and Risk was the day post-Brexit. The Financial and Risk Electron platform processed 79 billion messages on that day, and with no downtime. Yay! So we got it right. The legal division, one that maybe a lot of you have heard via the Westlaw product. That's just one of the products that we do. So a lot of lawyers, law libraries, small, medium, large law firms use us. A lot of governments use us as well. 85% of Fortune 500 customers use Thomson Reuters legal research. Tax and accounting business. So a lot of corporate tax departments, small, medium, large accountancy firms. All of the top 100 CPA accountancy firms use our platforms, and 94 of the top 100 law firms use our platforms for some of our top tax and accounting products. And our IP and science business, we've actually just sold, but we'll put it up here anyway because we're still looking after a lot of these systems. And this is government and academic research, patent protection, and more than 20 million individuals use IP and science products in academic, government, corporate, and legal institutions. But the one that probably all of you know is Reuters News, right? I'm guessing a lot of you here have heard their name. It's a very old organisation. It's been running 160 odd years, or something like that now. We're everywhere. We cover all of the major events. We've got correspondents in all of the major cities around the world. You'll see us at Rio in a few weeks' time. 2,600 journalists around the world. We produce 700,000 Reuters photos. So and they are really stunning. I mean, if you recently saw the quite iconic Baton Rouge photo of the black woman standing up to the the police officers, the fully armoured police officers. That was a Reuters image taken and was used on a lot of news platforms all over the world. You see us on the ticker bar of Sky, BBC, and Reuters, with that heritage, we were the first to report the Titanic hitting an iceberg, the first to report the fall of the Berlin Wall, also the first to report the Facebook IPO. And we also delivered news to Parliament on Lincoln's death before the US Embassy in London knew. So no one in Parliament really believed Julius Reuter when he came in with this message to say that Lincoln had died, but about 6 hours later, when the US Embassy found out, that was really what cemented Reuters' name as being the trusted source of impartial news and being the first there. So what you're all asking is, where the hell does the pigeon fit into this? So we have a history of innovation, and we like to think that that's still continuing today in our modern platforms. And Julius Reuter started by using pigeons to bridge gaps between telegraph networks. So based out of Belgium, he wasn't in Brussels, he was in a small border town. I can't remember off the top of my head what the town was, but essentially he was really well connected between the exchanges in Germany, the exchange in Paris and Belgium. And what he found out was that the telegraph networks were not connected. So what he figured out to use through previous jobs was to use pigeons to deliver these messages. They were much faster than carriage by road, much faster than trains as well. So we could get the news there first, we could get the stock prices there first. And that has evolved, and delivering news via stock tickers, as well as share prices, telegrams. The picture in the middle here is a legal lookup platform, and one of the original Westlaw platforms. And then came electronic trading. So our IDN network, that was our old financial trading network, was at one point one of the largest global private networks in the world, since been superseded by our Electron network. And then we have kind of the innovative mobile platforms. So Icon for mobile. This is this photo here. So that kind of gives you, hopefully, a sense of the scale for the company and the kind of workloads that we're operating, and the challenges that brings to moving an enterprise to the public cloud.
It's definitely my slide.
It's definitely your slide.
Okay, it says my name, so that's good. So what I want to do is just take a few minutes to sort of set the scene from where we've been for the last 4 years. It's sort of my history at Thomson Reuters. And so we started with private cloud, right? There was a huge demand for people needing to consume our IT resources very dynamically, very quickly. And 4 years ago we looked, and CloudStack was what we chose as that internal private cloud platform. It took down the sort of the time for consuming IT resources down to minutes or hours from what it had been previously, which was a very long time. Without going into exact details, it was a very long time. So it was definitely our first foray into hosting these sorts of services internally, and it worked very well, right? So we chose them because of our existing infrastructure. We wanted to make sure that we could overlay across what we were hosting internally, and the fact that we were a very small team. We wanted something that we were comfortable with. So that was CloudStack, and we took the opportunity about 2 years ago to go and look at the market again and go and have a look, and we chose OpenStack. So we looked at what was mature, the velocity that was happening in private cloud, and so we went with those. So what happened next? Let's not sit around on private cloud. What we saw was not a lot of honeybees inside a big corporation. It was just the idea of people coming together and sharing ideas, and that's what private cloud did for us, right? It took a huge organization, over 100 locations globally, lots of different diverse development teams, people working on completely diverse pieces of kit, platforms, ideas, and it sort of got them around to the idea of this cloud thing being real, right? And so we found that what we needed was a central location. So we have like an internal Facebook, I guess. And we got all the guys together they started contributing. So I think at the moment, on the last count this morning, we have over 1,000 collaborators on that particular site alone. And these are guys that are talking about cloud, right, and what they are currently doing in private cloud, and again, what people are doing in AWS. So we looked at that, and what we really enjoyed was looking at these diverse teams, and the fact that they were being really dynamic and not being static with the workloads that they were running. What's really good is the fact that we get this continuous feedback loop, and I can't express like how important that is for us internally at Thomson Reuters, right? The idea that these teams that would never ever speak to each other ever, they're in different locations on different products, and they're coming together and exchanging these ideas with each other, and it really gels, and that's what pushed us towards public cloud, right? So we knew that the velocity of private cloud that we were running just wasn't enough. Our heads of the organizations came together, discussed what we were doing in private cloud, and said, okay, public cloud is where we want to go. They've got all these platform as a service. We've got pieces of technology that are out there already. Let's capitalize on this and really work with the dynamic nature that we've seen with these development teams coming together. So just to talk a little bit about what we've done, we decided to look at how we can drive scale from scale, and that for me that's important because it's talking about how these guys are taking their products and merging them together. So where previously we were running at scale within private cloud or even within AWS, we're now getting those guys to pull their resources together, and I really like that. Scale of services, so the velocity piece again is tremendously important for us, and we came together at the beginning of this year as internal private cloud and with the developers and created this center of excellence. So the idea that you have people who have been consuming cloud and people who have been delivering cloud to come together and really understand what the business is doing. So I think it's up to you.
Yeah. So what does a central kind of cloud center of excellence do? Well, it's more about kind of being a gatepost than a gatekeeper. A lot of people will, say, oh, you shouldn't put walls around the cloud. It should be open. It should be this and it should be that. Okay, that's fine, and it might work in your startup, but essentially it doesn't work in an enterprise. You need to have a supportable platform. You need to have a platform that we know is what's going to happen. We know exactly what it looks like, and we can provide a base shell and a base amount of support for those development teams. So one of the first challenges we faced was how to, come up with this design standard. How do we put what we build in our data centers, essentially what we standardize in our data centers, onto the public cloud? So we started looking at a few tools, and we started looking at CloudFormation specifically, and it was really good, but it didn't do everything we wanted it to. So we started to build a system with Python that would go in after we've created an Amazon account. We'd feed the tool the account ID and the root, the service account that gets set up to start with, and the tool effectively goes in, builds the VPC, it builds all of the connectivity, the subnets, the roles, the policies, everything we need to have a standard shell that is TR likable, and all of those security considerations as well. So that's kind of more of the back end, right? But the front end, we wanted to make it really easy for our developers. We've got a lot of developers that were already using the public cloud, and as Sean alluded to, we had a big problem with shadow IT, of people just sticking it on the Amex. It doesn't work anymore, right? We've got to consolidate that billing. But we wanted to make it as easy as possible for those guys to onboard. So there was another big initiative to move a lot of our internal service management to ServiceNow. So we thought, great, we'll jump onto that project and get our stuff in ServiceNow. So people that want to onboard with public cloud now just go to one form on ServiceNow, say, I want a new AWS application. It comes through our workflow. 90% of it is automated at the moment, but 100% is on its way. And with Rundeck, we can automate those things such as the Active Directory changes, putting people into the right group in there, so that we can provide SAML federated login. We were very kind of anxious about giving everyone a account, a user in Amazon for each account they wanted to be accessible to. We needed to have that control in-house. We needed to be able to, manage movers, leavers, and ensure that people only have access to those resources that they need to have access to. And there's a fair amount of compliance in there as well that we have to abide by with certain regulations. So we have three currently roles that we use with SAML. We have an administrator role, which is really only granted to the guys in our team that oversee it. We have a power user role, which does nearly everything apart from create users. There's a couple of other things it can't do, and a read-only role. These roles will get more granular going forward, and we'll tighten up those policies and those roles as we kind of evolve the standard going forward and getting those different use cases on board. So the Python package that runs it, I spoke about it a little bit earlier. We used a workflow management tool called Luigi, and I don't know, has anyone heard of Luigi before? No? So it was developed by Spotify, and they use it for a lot of their big Hadoop-based workflow management. We're not doing any of that with it. We're doing really, really small pieces of Python which go off to, using Boto 3, go off to the Amazon API and create things for us. But we find that Luigi can manage that workflow really, really well. So that was one thing we did. As I say, we tried to use CloudFormation. We had a few challenges with it doing everything. We still do use it for some things, but a lot of that template is generated by the Python, and then it just gets fed into to CloudFormation later. And using this deployment tool that we've developed allows us to easily create release cycles for standardized account changes. So if we want to modify those role policies, we can roll it out across all of the accounts at once. It's not a manual process. We don't have to have an administrator log into each account to go and change that. We can update the settings within the Python, upload it to Git, run it, bang, it's deployed across all of our accounts. And that's one of the challenges that gets faced when you're running a lot of accounts in Amazon. I haven't spoken about application deployment here because that's really still down to the application development team. So those different business units, those 4 different business units, they'll have multiple development teams working on all of the different products that they're selling, and we really don't have visibility of that. We do try and standardize the deployment tools we're using for applications. We have a good one that's developed internally that we're focused on delivering, but there's still have a reasonable amount of flexibility to what tool they're going to use to deploy their application to the cloud. So what have we done for each of our business units? So at the moment, each of our business units have 3 AWS accounts. So if you think back to the slide that I presented earlier with the F&R, tax and accounting, legal, etc. So F&R would have an F&R sandbox account, they'd have a non-prod account, and a production account. What does that mean? Well, a sandbox account effectively looks like this. Where's the data center connectivity? There isn't. It's basically just a play pit. They can't do anything that's going to be any revenue generating kit. It's not really a development environment even. It's just go in there, get a feel for Amazon, see what the potential is, see what the tools you can use, and then when you're ready to actually commit to paying a little bit more money for it, move into the non-prod account. And then that's where we can do a little bit more development work. We get that connectivity back to the data center with Direct Connect, although tactically on VPNs at the moment. And then, when it's ready, we'll just move it into the production account. And it should be seamless because they should be using application deployment methods that doesn't really care what account you're pointing it to. And the non-prod and production account, barring a few security constraints and tightening, should look pretty similar. But it's good to have that overall separation within the account. So we do enforce some tagging, and it's really the name of the application, an application ID, an identifier that we can refer that back to for our internal billing, and also a cost center ID that we use in combination with the asset ID. There might be more in the future, but from this we can still do quite a lot. We're looking at things like, do we need to tag resources that are development and think about turning them off at the weekend, and things like this, deleting them if they don't have a certain amount of, if they haven't been accessed for a while. But they're the three main ones that we've kind of agreed to at the moment. And getting people to agree to those three was a challenge enough, especially for the groups that are already in Amazon and are just using their own tags and everything. So tagging's okay for this, for tagging resources in an account. If you think back to our non-prod account for F&R, you might have 20 to 100 different products in there. It's a nightmare to manage, right? What we'd really like to see is something a little bit more akin to the Azure resource group model, where we can actually just say, well, that is one application, that's another. And we're getting towards that with roles and policies in Amazon, but it's so much easier in Azure. I hate to say it, but it is so much easier to do. And Bastion, Bastion design, really only applicable to the sandbox, because our non-prod and production will have connectivity back to the data center. However, we're looking at, it will have bastions in our non-prod and prod as well, but we're looking at a Netflix Bless kind of situation. We're not quite sold on Bless as a whole, but something very similar to it, which is basically certificate. I can't remember. But I recommend going and checking it out. They did a talk at it at the OSCon a few months ago. It's on YouTube. It's pretty cool. So some of the challenges we faced doing this. One, CloudFormation was really good, and we started doing a lot of development in it to actually provision these shells for accounts. But we found silly things like naming IAM policies in CloudFormation. You just can't do it. You can create the policy, but you can't give it a name that is pretty. So if we think back to our SAML login for our user, and the user goes to our ADFS, they log in through that, they get given a list of options for what account they log into and which role they'd like to sign into as. If we wanted to just say power user, well, this account power user, we couldn't do it with CloudFormation. It would be this account power user plus a ID at the end of it. If we did it through the API, we could name them. So that's one of the reasons why we use Boto 3 for a lot of these. And yeah, those federated logins across different accounts is not very clean. I don't really have any recommendations on how to make that more pretty, but especially for me in our team, where we have visibility of all of the accounts, you log in and have a huge selection. It's not very clean. But as I say, we had to go down that route because we couldn't see any other way of being able to manage those levers and movers. When people federate in, the other issue we've got at the moment we're thinking about with federated logins is with service accounts. So how do you give a service an account to access those AWS APIs with an API key, without creating a user in the AWS account? Because when you federate a login, you get an STS token back for an hour, which means an application, even if we create a service account in AD, would have to re-authenticate every hour. We're still thinking about how we're going to do that, and there's been a bit of toing and froing with some of the development teams. They're not quite happy with that, and it's a little bit heavyweight for some of the development stuff, but I'm sure we're going to get that ironed out, and I'd love to come back and tell you how we've done it in the future. DNS across our accounts and back to the data center is a big nightmare. Route 53 is really good. It's very difficult across accounts though, especially for things like vanity names and .thomsonreuters.com addresses, because we can't. there's no way for us to enforce uniqueness across different accounts, and also back in our data center. So if someone goes and says, I've created an image called thomas.thomsonreuters.com in our traditional data center, and then someone goes, oh, I've created another one in the cloud, and it's called thomas.thomsonreuters.com. There's no way of us to actually be able to check that at the moment. So we're thinking about that. We've got a design. Again, I'd love to come back and tell you about how we did that in the future, but it's something we're still working on, so it didn't feel appropriate to show you today. Another one of the challenges is a little bit more kind of mental, a bit more educational, and it's where teams that are already in AWS already like it their way, right? And they don't want to move into the enterprise approach to AWS, and that's completely understandable. And it's more about that, changing the mindset and getting them to buy into the approach. We've made a lot of progress. A lot of the development teams are very on board, as Sean mentioned, and they kind of pushed us to this approach anyway. Account creation is very manual. It's still. So I'll touch on that, I think, on the next slide. And granular access to certain resources it's not really very trivial when you're using federated login. So what would we wish for if we had to do it again? We'd love an enterprise API. We'd love a single point where we can query for all of our accounts. We'd love a central point that we can go into and pull up all billing. We've got consolidated billing, but it's still a bit of a mess, to be honest, to actually get the access to the bits of the billing that you need. A support portal for all of the accounts that are there as well. Currently, the support setup is that we can talk to Amazon directly, but it's very much on an account by account basis. It's difficult then to see if there's anything a bit wider that's going on because those tickets are linked to those accounts. A central support portal I think would be quite useful. I'd also love a way to automate account creation tied to our enterprise consolidated billing agreement. Somewhere that I could just point to an API and say, we need another account. And it's something that we could automate that whole workflow end to end. That's the really one bit we can't automate at the moment. Yeah, better resource separation for development teams. I mean, I touched on this earlier with the Azure resource groups. I much prefer those to how we're doing it in AWS. Might be a bit controversial, but it's pretty good. What do we like about AWS then? Quite a lot. And we do genuinely like it. We get a load of energy from the development teams and also senior management. They're really on board. It's the fastest uptake. We've never seen uptake like it with a service that our central data center organization has released. They love having the freedom on the platform, relatively. And they also love all of the services and tools that are out there. And I'm sure you were all in agreement with me when I say AWS is miles ahead of the competition on the sort of services that they're putting out there, especially some of the herd services, as I like to say. The documentation's really good. It's brilliant. I've not been able to not find anything I've needed to at the moment. And the reference architectures that are on GitHub, also on the Amazon blog, fantastic place for learning about how to build applications, and it's something that we've used quite a lot internally to educate some of those development teams. So what's next for us? Well, we're going to get Direct Connect plugged in at some point when our third-party suppliers plug it in. At the moment, we're tactically using VPNs, and it's just a bit of a pain to manage. Once we've got Direct Connect in place, we can get our non-prod environments properly built and our production environment. We're not going to be pushing out a production environment, I don't think, until we get Direct Connect in place, because it's too much risk for us moving from a VPN back to Direct Connect once we've got production deployments deployed. Cost optimization is something we're looking at. So I touched on it earlier with turning things off when they're not getting used, automatically killing resources that aren't properly tagged with the cost center ID and the asset ID. I've put education up here because I think that's quite an important point. We still got a lot of education to do for a lot of the internal development teams that maybe moved on to private cloud because they saw it as a really quick time to market, but actually haven't started using cloud in a cloud native way, and they're just using it in an IaaS fashion still and running, unreplicated databases and wondering what's going on when their host goes down. Whoa, where's your redundancy? And kind of golden AMIs, but not. So thinking about our AMIs and how we can take what we've got in the data center at the moment and kind of replicate it in the cloud. So putting all of our TR kind of shell in it, our TR security, hardening, things like DNS, NTP entries, and all of that kind of stuff. It's probably not going to be an image that we present to our business units, more of a toolkit for how to build an image with all of this hardening in place. But that's something we're still figuring out, and there's a lot more to figure out as well. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of work ahead of us, isn't there, Sean? So, thanks for listening. Has anyone got any questions for us? No.
All right.
Oh, there's a few.
I missed this one.
You can answer these.
Oh,
I just spoke for the last
you
15
did.
minutes.
Just sat down.
Hi, you mentioned there are several applications that have no native support for cloud. Can you mention some examples and how you're trying to figure out a way to move them to the cloud?
So I guess when we talk about applications that aren't cloud native, it's approaches that we've seen in traditional data centers in the past, right? And it's about moving them into the paradigm of cloud. And I think what you find there is what Tom was touching on earlier. It's the idea of education, right? So some of the development teams that have been producing some fantastic applications inside Thomson Reuters have dealt with the traditional data center as it's been. So we're a very large enterprise, lots of acquisition, and having to work with a traditional data center. So I think that's what we're trying to get through to some of these people, is that it's about education. It's about showing them what's capable in AWS and getting them to look at their traditional architectures and move in there.
Any other question?
I should probably just mention as well that a lot of those workloads that we already see in OpenStack probably won't go into AWS because it's just not the right place for that application to go. They'll probably move back into traditional infrastructure
For the time being.
until that application evolves and it's at a ready state for it to move into AWS.
Just out of curiosity, how many accounts do you have? AWS accounts?
Lots.
The ones that we know about? Or lots, yeah. It's the high tens, isn't it?
Yeah, I think what we call them is our strategic accounts, the ones that we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
And then we have snowflakes, which are been customized over time by people that have been using AWS a lot longer than we've embraced it. So it's about working with those snowflakes and coaxing them into our sort of strategic accounts.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions? No? Sure. Well, thank you very much.
Cool.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.